I'd like to thank everyone for their hard work, but especially my strategic vision that made this deal possible. Eric's voice carried across the private dining room at Monarch's, the city's most exclusive restaurant. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. My deal. My strategy. My 6 months of sleepless nights. He stood there in his expensive suit, champagne glass raised, taking credit for everything I'd built from nothing. The entire executive team applauded. The client representatives smiled and nodded. Even the chairman, Mr. Harrison, raised his glass in acknowledgement. I sat frozen, fury burning beneath my polite smile. My hands gripped my napkin under the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Eric caught my eye and had the audacity to wink, like we were sharing some inside joke. That was the night my story changed. That was the moment I stopped being the grateful subordinate and became someone else entirely. Someone who understood that nice people don't always finish last. Sometimes they finish first, but only after they stop being nice. The applause faded. Dinner continued. And I began planning my revenge with the same careful precision I'd used to close the deal Eric was claiming as his own. I excused myself before dessert, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, absurdly luxurious. I stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the fury in my eyes. My hands trembled as I gripped the cold marble counter. He took everything, I whispered to my reflection, my voice cracking. Everything I worked for. Everything I earned. The door opened behind me. Amanda from accounting walked in, her face bright with excitement. She didn't notice my expression, too caught up in the celebration outside. Congratulations on Eric's big win. This is huge for the company. You must be so proud to work under such brilliant leadership. She disappeared into a stall, still chattering about Eric's genius. I stood there, letting her words cut deeper. Even my colleagues saw me as nothing more than Eric's assistant, his support staff. Not the architect of a multi-million-dollar deal. Just the woman who worked under him. I fixed my lipstick with shaking hands, forced my expression back to neutral, and returned to the dining room. Eric was holding court, telling stories about the deal process. My stories. Using my words. Getting my applause. My name is Lauren Pierce, and 6 months ago, I was a senior account executive at Crestline Capital. I'd been with the company for 4 years, working my way up from junior analyst. Smart, ambitious, quietly proud of my track record. I'd closed solid deals before, but nothing like the quantum tech account. That was supposed to be my breakout moment. The deal that would finally earn me the vice president promotion I'd been promised for 2 years. Eric Barnes was my manager, a smooth-talking charmer who joined the company 3 years ago and climbed the ladder by taking credit for other people's work. I'd watched him do it to others. I'd even felt sorry for them, thinking they should have been smarter, more assertive. I never imagined he'd do it to me. I was too valuable, too visible. Or so I thought. The quantum tech deal was worth $12 million in the first year alone, with potential for $30 million over 5 years. Landing them would transform Crestline's tech sector presence. Everyone wanted that account. Eric wanted it because it would make him a hero. I wanted it because I knew I could actually deliver results. The difference between us was simple. He wanted the credit. I wanted to do the work. 6 months earlier, the quantum tech pitch meeting had been a disaster from the start. Eric had insisted on leading it, despite knowing nothing about their business model. He'd dismissed my research, called my presentation slides too detailed, and changed my carefully crafted pitch to something generic and uninspiring. During the meeting, he took 3 phone calls, checked his watch repeatedly, and treated the quantum tech executives like they should be grateful for his time. The CEO, Patricia Nguyen, had looked ready to walk out. But then she'd asked a specific question about data integration. Eric had fumbled, clearly having no idea what she meant. I'd stepped in smoothly, explaining our approach with real understanding and empathy for their challenges. Patricia's expression had changed. She'd started directing questions to me instead of Eric. By the end of the meeting, Eric was practically invisible. Patricia shook my hand firmly. "Miss Pierce, I look forward to working with you on this. Send me your detailed proposal. Not Eric's proposal. Mine. I'd left that meeting feeling validated. Finally, someone saw my value. What I didn't know was that Eric saw it too. And he'd already started planning how to steal it. I stayed late that night, building the proposal that would change everything. The office was empty except for security and the cleaning staff. The janitor's vacuum hummed somewhere on the floor above me as I worked through financial projections and implementation timelines. My desk lamp was the only light in the entire department. Just one break, I whispered to myself around midnight, rubbing my tired eyes. Just one big deal, and they'll finally see me. Finally promote me. Finally acknowledge I'm more than just Eric's subordinate. I pulled up Quantum Tech's quarterly reports, analyzing their pain points with the kind of detailed attention Eric would never bother with. This wasn't just about closing a deal. It was about solving their actual problems with customized solutions they couldn't find anywhere else. What I didn't know was that Eric was still in his office, door cracked, watching me work. Watching me pour my expertise and creativity into a proposal he was already planning to claim. He'd learned the best way to steal someone's work wasn't to do it obviously. It was to make them think you were helping, to position yourself as a mentor or collaborator. Then, when the moment came, rewrite the narrative completely. The next morning, Eric appeared at my desk with coffee and his signature charming smile. Lauren, great work yesterday. Patricia was impressed. He set the coffee down like it was a gift. I've been thinking, why don't we co-lead this project? You handle the technical details, I'll manage the client relationship and strategy. Something in his tone felt rehearsed, but I was so starved for recognition that I didn't question it. Co-leading a major deal with my manager? That had to be good for my career, right? Really? You want to co-lead with me? Of course. You've earned it. Your knowledge of their systems is invaluable. We'll make a great team. He'd used that word deliberately. Team. It made me feel included, valued, like we were partners. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate the opportunity. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'll handle the politics and positioning. You focus on the brilliant technical work you do so well. I'd smiled, feeling flattered. Finally, Eric was recognizing my contributions. Finally, I was being seen as more than just another account executive. I didn't realize he'd just divided our responsibilities in a way that would make him visible and keep me invisible. He'd take credit for strategy and client relationships. I'd do the actual work, hidden behind technical details nobody understood. 2 weeks later, the first sign of theft appeared in my inbox. Patricia had sent an email praising the preliminary proposal, but it was addressed only to Eric. Eric, excellent initial thoughts. This is exactly the direction we needed. Looking forward to the detailed plan. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Eric had replied within minutes. Happy to deliver, Patricia. This is what Crestline does best. Not we. Not my team. Just taking credit as if he'd done everything himself. My heart pounded as I read the exchange. I forwarded it to Eric with a simple question. Should I be included on client communications? He appeared at my desk 15 minutes later, laughing like I'd told a joke. Relax, Lauren. Patricia knows you're involved. I mentioned you in our call yesterday. We're a team, remember? Don't get hung up on email formalities. But I wrote that entire proposal. And I'm presenting it to her. That's how these relationships work. The client wants one point of contact. That's me. But trust me, everyone internally knows you're contributing. He'd said it so casually, so reasonably, that I'd felt silly for questioning him. Maybe I was being oversensitive. Maybe this was just how corporate politics worked at higher levels. I let it go. First mistake. 3 weeks into the project, I walked into a client meeting to hear my exact words coming out of Eric's mouth. The phrasing I'd spent hours crafting to explain our implementation timeline. The metaphor I'd created to make complex data architecture understandable. Even the joke I'd written into my notes about making their system sing instead of screech. Patricia and her team nodded, impressed. That's a brilliant way to explain it, Eric. Your team is lucky to have such clear leadership. My hands shook beneath the conference table. I gripped my pen so hard it left marks on my palm. Eric continued, using my slides, my research, my ideas, presenting them as if they'd sprung fully formed from his own mind. When Patricia asked a technical question, Eric smoothly deflected. Lauren can address the specifics. She's excellent with details. Details. Like I was some kind of administrative assistant, not the architect of everything he was presenting. I answered Patricia's question professionally, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. The seed of revenge had been planted. I just didn't know it yet. After the meeting, Eric clapped me on the shoulder. Great support in there, Lauren. This is why we make such a good team. I smiled. Yes, we really do. That afternoon, a junior analyst named Kyle approached me hesitantly near the coffee machine. He glanced around to make sure we were alone. Lauren, I need to tell you something. It's about Eric. My stomach tightened. What about him? Yesterday, he printed copies of all your slides from the shared project folder. Then he went into the conference room and rehearsed presenting them. Like, word for word. Even the parts you wrote in your personal notes section. Kyle looked uncomfortable delivering this information. I thought you should know. It seemed wrong. Proof. Someone else had witnessed Eric's theft. But I didn't react dramatically. Instead, I thanked Kyle calmly and went back to my desk. Then I spent the next hour doing something that would change everything. I began saving every file, every email, every document with timestamps. I created a separate folder on my personal cloud storage. I screenshot conversations, saved draft versions showing my authorship, documented every contribution I made. If Eric wanted to play games with credit and recognition, I was going to make sure I had evidence. Undeniable, time-stamped, lawyer-grade evidence. I wasn't planning revenge yet. I was just protecting myself. Or so I told myself. 2 months into the project, disaster struck. Patricia called Eric's cell during our weekly team meeting, and we all watched his face drain of color. What do you mean you're considering other options? Patricia, let's discuss this. I can come to your office right now. He listened for another minute, his expression growing more panicked. I understand. Yes. I'll work on addressing those concerns immediately. He hung up and stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. The deal's falling apart. Patricia says we're not understanding their core needs, that our proposal feels generic and impersonal. Generic and impersonal. Exactly what happens when someone presents ideas they didn't actually create and can't properly explain. We need to fix this immediately. Team meeting now. The meeting was chaos. Eric barked orders, assigned random tasks, accomplished nothing. Then at 4 p.m., his phone rang again. Family emergency. I have to leave. Lauren, you handle this. Fix whatever Patricia's upset about. He grabbed his coat and left, leaving me alone with a collapsing $12 million deal. I sat in the empty conference room, staring at the whiteboard covered in Eric's useless suggestions. Then I pulled out my laptop and got to work. Not fixing Eric's mess. Building something better. Something real. It took all night, but I rebuilt the proposal from the ground up, focusing on what Patricia actually needed instead of what Eric thought sounded impressive. At 3 a.m., I sent Patricia an email. Not a corporate template or a formal proposal revision. A real message, written from one professional to another. Patricia, I've been thinking about your concerns. You're right. What we've presented feels disconnected from your actual needs. Here's what I think we missed. I outlined 3 specific problems I'd identified in their current system, explained why our original proposal didn't address them, and suggested real solutions. I attached a revised implementation plan that reflected actual empathy for their situation. I hit send and went home to sleep for 3 hours. When I woke up, Patricia had responded. Lauren, this is exactly what I needed to see. This is the understanding and insight I was hoping for from Crestline. You've completely addressed my concerns. You saved this deal. Thank you. I smiled for the first time in weeks, sitting in my tiny apartment, reading those words over and over. Someone saw my value. Someone acknowledged my work. What I didn't know until later was that Eric had been BCC'd on my email to Patricia. He'd woken up to see not just my message, but her response praising me specifically. By the time I got to the office that morning, Eric had already begun spinning the narrative to protect himself. I walked into the office expecting praise, maybe even acknowledgement from Eric about saving the deal. Instead, I found an email from Eric to Chairman Harrison, sent at 6 a.m. Sir, glad to report my team executed my direction perfectly to resolve the quantum tech concerns. The relationship is back on track thanks to the strategy one implemented overnight. Lauren did excellent work following my guidance. My stomach dropped. He'd forwarded my email to Patricia to the chairman, but framed it as if I'd been following his instructions. As if the ideas were his, filtered through me. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. Anyone reading his message would think Eric had masterminded everything while I'd simply been a good employee executing his vision. I sat at my desk, staring at that email, and felt something break inside me. Not my spirit, my patience. My willingness to play by rules that were designed to keep people like me invisible, while people like Eric collected accolades they didn't earn. I opened my personal folder of documentation. Months of evidence. Timestamps proving every idea originated from me. Emails showing Eric had been uninvolved or actively wrong. Patricia's direct praise addressed to me alone. I had everything I needed to destroy him, but something stopped me from acting immediately. Revenge rushed is revenge wasted. I was going to do this, right? I considered quitting that day, drafting my resignation letter in my head during my commute home. But as I sat in traffic, something shifted in my thinking. Quitting would let Eric win completely. He'd get credit for the deal, the promotion, everything, while I'd be just another person who couldn't handle corporate politics.
No.
I wasn't going anywhere. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse slow, my mind clear. I'm going to let him build his stage, I whispered to myself in my car. And then I'm going to make sure the spotlight burns him alive. I went home and made a new plan. Not emotional. Not rushed.
Strategic.
Eric had taught me something valuable, even if he didn't mean to. The person who controls the narrative controls the outcome. He'd been controlling the narrative by staying close to leadership, by positioning himself visibly while keeping me in the background. But narratives can be rewritten, especially when you have truth on your side. I spent that evening organizing my evidence more carefully, creating a timeline that showed exactly when each idea originated, who contributed what, which communications proved my central role. By midnight, I had a case that would be impossible to refute. Now I just needed the right moment to present it, and the patience to wait for that moment to arrive. Over the next month, I played the perfect subordinate. Polite, professional, supportive. I attended meetings where Eric presented my work and smiled encouragingly. I sent him helpful messages and thorough reports. To everyone watching, I was the ideal team player. But behind the scenes, I was documenting everything.
Dates.
Messages. Edit histories. Client responses that mention me specifically. Every piece of evidence carefully organized and stored. I created a master document that told the complete story, Lauren's actual contributions versus Eric's claims. The document was devastating. It showed a pattern of theft spanning the entire project. Most importantly, it included Patricia's direct communications praising my specific insights, often with timestamps showing Eric hadn't even been involved in those conversations. I stayed calm. I stayed invisible. I played my role perfectly, because I understood something Eric didn't. Sometimes the most powerful move is the one nobody sees coming. When people think you're weak or compliant, they stop watching for threats. Eric had stopped watching me completely. He thought he'd won. He thought I'd accepted my place as his talented but credit-free subordinate. His confidence was going to be his downfall. And I was going to enjoy every second of watching it happen. 6 weeks later, Crestline held a company-wide celebration. The quantum tech deal had officially closed. $12 million in year one, with projections for $30 million over 5 years. The biggest tech sector deal in company history. The conference room was decorated with balloons and a banner reading, "Record-breaking success." Chairman Harrison gave a speech praising innovation and excellence. Then Eric stood up to thunderous applause. "Thank you all. This deal represents the kind of strategic thinking that makes Crestline an industry leader. I'm proud of my team's execution, but ultimately, leadership means taking responsibility for results. He went on for 10 minutes, describing his vision, his strategy, his relationship building with Patricia. My name was mentioned once. And, of course, Lauren provided excellent technical support. Technical support. 6 months of work reduced to technical support. I clapped along with everyone else, my face carefully neutral. Inside, I whispered to myself, "Enjoy it while it lasts, Eric. This is the last celebration you'll ever steal from me." Chairman Harrison announced Eric was being promoted to Senior Vice President, effective immediately. The position I'd been promised. The promotion I'd earned through actual work, given to Eric for work he'd stolen. I smiled and applauded. Patient.
Calm. Deadly.
Because I knew something Eric didn't. Sometimes the best revenge is served after they think they've won. After they've gotten comfortable. After they've stopped watching their backs. 2 days after the company celebration, my desk phone rang. Unknown number. Lauren Pierce speaking. Ms. Pierce, this is Angela Martinez, Executive Assistant to Patricia Nguyen at Quantum Tech. My pulse quickened. Hello, Angela. How can I help you? I'm calling to thank you again for your exceptional work on this project. Ms. Nguyen wanted me to extend a personal invitation. Chairman Harrison is flying out next week for a celebration dinner. We'd very much like you to attend. Ms. Nguyen specifically requested your presence. I paused, feeling the weight of that sentence. Patricia specifically requested me. Not Eric. Not the team.
Me.
I'd be honored to attend. Thank you for thinking of me. Ms. Nguyen doesn't forget who actually does the work, Ms. Pierce. She's looking forward to seeing you there. Angela hung up, and I sat very still at my desk, processing what had just happened. The opportunity I'd been waiting for had just arrived. A dinner with Patricia, with Chairman Harrison, with Eric present. A stage where the real story could finally be told. Not through accusations or complaints. Through simple, direct conversation with the people who mattered most. I didn't tell Eric about the invitation. Let him be surprised. Let him arrive at that dinner thinking he was still in control. The anticipation of his face when reality hit was going to make everything worth it. I spent the entire weekend preparing. Not the work itself. I'd been ready for months. But preparing myself. My demeanor. My delivery. My presence. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror practicing different expressions. Calm confidence. Light humor. Professional composure. The goal wasn't to seem angry or vindictive. The goal was to seem absolutely certain of the truth, unshakable in my knowledge of what actually happened. I rehearsed answering questions about the deal. Simple, factual answers that highlighted my role without attacking Eric directly. Let the facts speak. Let the timestamp speak. Let Patricia's own words speak. I practiced small smiles, casual responses, the perfect performance of someone who had nothing to hide because the truth was on their side. By Sunday night, I'd transformed. No longer the invisible worker bee. Not yet the warrior seeking justice. Just a professional woman ready to tell her story to people who deserve to hear it. I picked out my outfit, a deep navy suit that looked expensive but professional. My mother's pearl earrings. Low heels that wouldn't distract. I wanted to look confident, and completely in control. Because I was. Monday morning, Eric stopped by my desk. By the way, big celebration dinner Thursday night. The chairman and Quantum Tech executives. Should be a great night. I smiled. I know. Patricia's assistant called me directly to invite me. His smile faltered for just a second.
Oh, great.
Thursday arrived. The dinner was at Riverside Manor, possibly even more exclusive than Monarch's. Crystal chandeliers. White tablecloths. Waiters in tuxedos. The Quantum Tech executives arrived first, greeting Chairman Harrison warmly. Then Eric swept in, working the room like he owned it. He was in his element at events like this, charming and confident. I arrived quietly, slipping into my seat without fanfare. Patricia saw me and smiled genuinely, coming over to shake my hand. Lauren, so glad you could make it. I've been looking forward to talking with you. Eric noticed the interaction, his expression tightening slightly. The dinner began. Multiple courses, expensive wine, conversations about business and strategy. Eric held court from his end of the table, telling stories about the quantum deal. Embellished stories that made him the hero of every challenge. I sat quietly, barely touching my wine, listening to every word. Chairman Harrison was directly across from me, occasionally glancing my way with an expression I couldn't quite read. Patricia sat to my left, participating in conversations, but also watching me. Like she was waiting for something. Like she knew something was about to happen. The main course arrived. Eric was mid-story about how he'd personally saved the deal when Patricia suddenly interrupted. Eric, can I ask something? How exactly did you turn things around when I almost pulled out? He froze mid-sentence. Everyone turned to listen. Eric recovered quickly, his charm kicking in. Well, Patricia, it was a matter of really understanding your core needs and restructuring our entire approach. I spent an entire night rebuilding the proposal from scratch. An entire night? Patricia's tone was neutral, but something flickered in her eyes.
Yes.
It was crucial to get it right. I actually had to leave a family emergency to handle it. He was lying so smoothly, believing his own narrative. Chairman Harrison leaned forward, interested. That level of dedication is what makes Crestline special. Eric continued, growing bolder. And, of course, mentoring Lauren through the process was rewarding. She's learning a lot from this project. The words hung in the air. Mentoring. Like I was his student, not his colleague. Like I was learning from him rather than carrying the entire project. I just smiled, the expression carefully crafted. Oh yes, Eric's been very involved. My tone was honey with poison underneath. Patricia caught it immediately, her expression shifting. Chairman Harrison's eyes sharpened, studying my face more closely. The table had gone slightly quieter. Eric didn't notice the shift in energy. He was too busy basking in his own performance, too confident in his control of the narrative. Lauren's really come into her own under my guidance, he continued, digging himself deeper. It's been rewarding watching her grow. I took a sip of water, my hand steady, waiting for the perfect moment that I knew was coming. Chairman Harrison set down his fork, his full attention now on the conversation. The entire table had gone quiet, sensing something important was happening. Lauren, he said, his voice carrying authority. Tell me something. How exactly did you turn things around after Patricia's concerns? What was your approach? Every eye at the table turned to me. Eric's face froze, his confident expression cracking. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. I set down my water glass and met the chairman's gaze directly. Actually, sir, that's an interesting story. I kept my voice calm, factual, friendly. No anger, just truth. Patricia called with concerns on a Thursday afternoon. Eric left for a family emergency around 4 p.m. I stayed and spent that night rebuilding our approach from the ground up. Patricia was nodding slightly, confirming my timeline. I realized we'd been presenting generic solutions instead of addressing quantum tech-specific pain points. So I scrapped the template approach and created something customized. I pulled out my phone, opened my email app, and found the message I'd sent Patricia. I sent Patricia an email around 3 a.m. explaining 3 specific problems we'd missed. She responded that morning thanking me for the insight and saying I'd saved the deal. I showed the timestamp on my phone. 3:17 a.m. Patricia's response. 7:42 a.m. Addressed to me alone. You said you worked all night on that, Eric. Chairman Harrison said quietly, his tone sharp. But this email is from Lauren. Time-stamped. Eric's face had drained of all color. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again. Well, yes, Lauren sent the email, but we discussed the strategy. I directed her approach before I left that evening. The ideas were collaborative. His voice sounded desperate, losing its usual smooth confidence. I remained perfectly calm. Actually, Eric, you were in meetings until you left for your emergency. We never discussed strategy. I made those decisions independently. Patricia spoke up, her voice clear and firm. The email I received was deeply personal and showed intimate knowledge of our systems. The kind of knowledge that comes from real analysis, not collaborative discussion. Lauren identified problems in our architecture that Eric had never mentioned in any of our calls. She looked directly at Eric. You told me you wrote that email, Eric. That it reflected your deep understanding of our needs. The silence was absolute. Chairman Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression hard. Eric, is that true? Did you tell Patricia you wrote Lauren's email? I said I handled the situation, Eric stammered. That's different from saying I wrote. You wrote in your email to me that your team executed your direction perfectly, I said quietly, pulling up that message on my phone. You forwarded my email to Patricia, but framed it as if I was following your instructions. I showed the screen to Chairman Harrison. He read it, his jaw tightening. Forward me that correspondence, Lauren. Both messages.
Now.
Eric tried to talk over the silence, his voice rising with panic. This is being taken out of context. Lauren's a valued member of my team. Of course we worked together. That's what teams do. Teams share credit, Eric, Patricia said coldly. They don't erase each other's contributions. I forwarded the emails to Chairman Harrison's phone. The whole table watched him read, his expression growing darker with each word. Then I did something I'd planned carefully. Sir, if you'd like, I can provide a complete timeline of the project. Every major decision, every client interaction, every document's creation date. I've kept detailed records. Chairman Harrison looked up at me, and something like respect crossed his face. You documented everything? Yes, sir. When I noticed inconsistencies in how credit was being assigned, I started keeping records. Timestamps, edit histories, client communications. Everything. Eric's face had gone from pale to flushed. This is ridiculous. Lauren's trying to undermine me because she's jealous of my promotion. This is just sour grapes. Is it? Chairman Harrison's voice was ice. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been systematically taking credit for another person's work, and then lying about it to me directly. The other executives at the table were watching with horrified fascination. This kind of public exposure didn't happen at celebration dinners. Angela, Patricia's assistant, was taking notes. Forward me everything, Lauren, Chairman Harrison repeated. Tonight. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence you've collected. I nodded. Yes, sir. The rest of dinner was excruciating for Eric. Conversations resumed, but stiffly, with everyone carefully avoiding acknowledging what had just happened. Eric sat in silence, his earlier bravado completely destroyed. When dessert arrived, Chairman Harrison stood with his wine glass. The table quieted immediately. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, his voice carrying through the room. To Lauren Pierce. For integrity, excellence, and doing the right thing when no one was watching. He looked directly at me. For having the courage to document truth when lies were more convenient. For saving a deal through real work rather than empty promises. And for teaching me a valuable lesson about looking past titles to see who's actually driving results. The table erupted in applause. Patricia raised her glass high. To Lauren, the real architect of this partnership. I stood, accepting the moment with grace. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job. No, Chairman Harrison said firmly. You were doing it with excellence. That's different. Eric sat frozen in his chair, unable to even lift his glass. His face was a mask of humiliation and rage. The promotion he'd celebrated. The recognition he'd stolen. The reputation he'd built on my work. All of it crumbling in real time. As we left the restaurant, Patricia pulled me aside. Thank you for being patient with the truth. I suspected something was off in Eric's presentations. Too polished, too disconnected from actual understanding. Now I know why. I smiled. Thank you for seeing it. Within 2 weeks, the consequences arrived swiftly and quietly. Eric's promotion to senior vice president was postponed pending review. Then, more quietly, his position was restructured. He was moved to a different division, a lateral move that everyone understood was actually a demotion. By the end of the month, he'd resigned, unable to handle the humiliation of everyone knowing the truth. I was called to Chairman Harrison's office on a Thursday morning. Miss Pierce, we need to discuss your future at Crestline. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Yes, sir. I'm offering you the position Eric was promoted to. Senior Vice President. You've more than earned it. The position I'd been promised 2 years ago. The position that should have been mine from the start. But instead of relief, I felt something else.
Clarity.
Sir, I appreciate that. Truly. But I'd like to ask for something different. He raised an eyebrow. Go on. I want to build my own team. Not inherit Eric's structure or his people. I want to select my own analysts, train them properly, and create a division based on real merit and honest collaboration. Chairman Harrison studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled.
Done.
You'll have budget for 5 people initially. Show me results and I'll give you more. I left his office not just with a title, but with the freedom to build something genuine. Something where credit went to the people who earned it. 3 months later, I walked past Eric's old office on my way to a client meeting. The nameplate had been removed from the door. The office sat empty, waiting for renovation. The same janitor I'd seen that late night 6 months ago, the one vacuuming while I built the proposal that changed everything, was cleaning the hallway. He looked up and smiled at me. Congratulations on your promotion, Miss Pierce. Well deserved. Thank you, Paolo. I appreciate that. I remember seeing you here late all those nights, working hard when everyone else went home. I always wondered if anyone noticed. Someone noticed, I said softly. Eventually, I walked into my new office, larger than my old space, with windows overlooking the city. On my desk sat the Quantum Tech Deal folder, a reminder of everything I'd fought for. My team was already there, waiting for our morning briefing. 5 brilliant people I'd personally selected. People who reminded me of myself. Talented, overlooked, hungry for opportunity. Good morning, everyone, I said, settling into my chair. Let's talk about the Peterson account. Kyle, I know you've done excellent preliminary work on this. Why don't you present your findings? I saw his face light up. Being seen, being credited, being valued. Know your worth, I whispered to myself, opening my laptop. And never let them steal your name again. Through my office window, I could see Crestline's logo on the building across the street. A company I'd almost left. A career I'd almost abandoned. Instead, I'd fought for truth.
And won.
Not through aggression or emotion, but through patience, documentation, and waiting for the perfect moment to let the truth speak for itself. Sometimes that's all it takes. The truth. And the courage to stand behind it, even when everyone else wants to believe the lie.